To Rabbi Kaploun, I think we've all been extremely concerned about the rise in anti-Semitism around the world and in the United States. We, of course, witnessed it here in the Washington area with the killings of 2 members of the Israeli embassy. We've seen it in my state of Maryland in terms of attacks on some Jewish small business owners and in other places around the world. And I think we all recognize that we have a united obligation to do everything we can to stop it. In that regard, I do want to ask you about President Trump's response to Tucker Carlson's decision to bring Nick Fuentes onto his show. And when the president was asked about it, he said, and I'm quoting, "I don't know much about him," referring to Nick Fuentes, "but if he wants to do it, get the word out, you know, people have to decide. Ultimately, people have to decide." Do you think that was a strong enough statement from President Trump to the issue of bringing Fuentes onto that radio platform, or that platform?
Thank you very much for your question. I think the President and the Secretary of State have made it perfectly clear that any type of anti-Semitism is not a place in America. That's number one, and that's something that guides the administration's policy as far as being a private civilian, but if confirmed, that I know is the policy, is anti-Semitism is to be condemned everywhere. Anti-Semitism is not just an American problem, it's a global problem. And a lot of hatred comes from ignorance. People aren't educated. But freedom of speech is something that's a right, and freedom of expression globally is an important part of what the administration's policy is. You have a right to hate, but we have a right to explain and stand up and abhor everything that you say. That's something that's in this country, and it's from our founding fathers.
Thank you.
So I believe very strongly that we can condemn remarks whenever they need to be condemned and educate people. We have to go back to my earlier statement when I said we have to educate people to not hate and respect one another and understand the facts. If we go back, all I ask is, I tell people, let them meet American soldiers who liberated the death camps. That's the best answer for any Holocaust denier anywhere.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Go ahead.
just a follow-up. So, look, I agree with you that the best way to respond to speech is with speech. I'm also a supporter of free speech, and which is why I have to say it's very worrisome that the Trump administration has been locking up some students for expressing their views on Gaza. But my question to you is this. The president didn't respond to the statements Nick Fuentes made with speech. I mean, he didn't say what he stands for, Nick Fuentes, is outrageous. And so I would have hoped when asked that the president would take that kind of position going forward. Let me just ask you this, and I asked your predecessor, the earlier envoy during the Biden administration, about this. I mean, you would agree with me that it's not anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish to criticize the actions of the government of Israel, right?
Thank you, Senator, for your question. I would refer back to the IRA definition of what is okay to criticize. You have a right to criticize a country, but if you are only going to criticize Israel, and that's every statement that you're making, but you're not going to be consistent across the board, in the IRA definitions, it's very, very clear that you need to condemn everything across the board and not just single out Israel. When you single out Israel is when it crosses that line of that it's becoming an anti-Semitic issue, possibly. If you're going to condemn the killings of Christians in the Sudan or the Uyghurs in China or things that are going on around the globe, and you're going to, at that point in time as well, condemn something that you don't like about a country, that's fine. But if you are particularly singling out Israel, that becomes a greater issue, and that's exactly what the IRA definitions have.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just if I could, I think if you look at members of this committee, for example, across the board, we've been very clear in condemning human rights violations, from Chinese actions against the Uyghurs to what's happening in Sudan, to what's happening in Burma, to what's happening in many other places around the world. But I hope you will agree with me that we should be consistent. In other words, the government of Israel should be held to the same standard that we apply to every other country of the world when it comes to human rights. Do you agree with that?
As I said before, Senator, that the IRA definition, if people are abiding by that definition,
No, this is a separate question.
then you
No,
can.
I'm just asking you a separate question, Rabbi. I mean, you pointed out that we should essentially have the same standard in terms of protection of human rights and justice and self-determination. Should we apply that equally to Israel, as many of us do to other countries and governments around the world?
I believe that the administration does apply that equally to Israel.
Okay. I think if you look at the Inspector General's report that came out of the State Department recently, they'll find not this administration, but the previous administration completely failed to do that. So, look, let's just make this clear. You agree that criticizing the Trump administration is not anti-American. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So in that sense, criticizing the actions of any government, in my view, is an expression of people's values and principles, and we should apply similar standards going forward, and I hope that we will do that across the board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen.